Uber Stalker. Last year I was on vacation in Southern Europe with a large group of friends. We have been there a while, and always took an Uber from our rented house to the city, which had very nice bars and clubs. The thing with Uber is, it allows very cheap and flexible transport, but it also opened up the door to a lot of creeps. I've had Uber drivers who are super cool, but also extremely drugged up road ragers who drive like maniacs and think they're impressive, and it is always the worst once an attractive woman sits in the car. It feels like a lot of total creeps think, now that I have her here in this situation where she can't flee, she is forced to talk to be nice to me. For that very reason the guys of our group always use their phone to call the Uber, so no creep picks the ride specifically because a female name popped up. Some of my friends even use male fake names because of that, but the guy we had that day was by far the worst. It is late evening, an Uber picks us up and drives me, 27M, 27M, 25F, 24F to the desired old town where we plan to go clubbing drink. While driving, the driver constantly looks at the two women in the back seat via the mirror. They only told me this afterwards. He kept starting conversations, but basically only addressed the girls who left answering to the guys, who gave short, non-detailed answers. Basically signaling that we won. Don't want to talk to. Don't think he needs to know our plans. To us he seemed way too pushy, and he wasn't really that big on hygiene. Giving off the classic, this exactly the scenario why we don't like booking Ubers vibe. Meanwhile we can't wait to arrive at our destination and get out of this uncomfortable, but not super horrible, situation. But that shit did not feel this great, when this guy didn't stop on the road, but instead pulled into a parking spot. He started fumbling with this phone and we were like, "Aight, weird, but let's get out," and left the car. To our surprise the guy then turned the car off and got out as well. We saw that red flag and just started walking away towards the bar area of the town without saying a word. Cars can't enter the old town. After 400 feet, once we reached the gates, we stopped because this was the meeting spot for the other half of our group, who took a separate Uber. And found out that this guy was fucking following us and stopped as well. You know the classic circle people form while talking, where one guy is just kinda standing next to it because people don't let him in. Yeah, we did that. We started making conversation about how long the others will take to get here, where they are right not, etc. And this guy keeps throwing in comments like he is part of the posse. Oh cool, even more people. This must be great evening. Broken English, but not that bad. Then we texted our friends in group chat that we are changing the meeting place to this bar. Because the fucking Uber driver is following us around and we want to lose him, so one of us started leading the group at a quick pace through the streets. They are very small, lots of people, high old town buildings all around them. We make turns at every corner trying to lose the guy, but he follows. Finally we reached a big plaza where there were hundreds of people closely together, basically queuing to enter the narrow street up ahead. We pushed through like rude douchebags, and successfully lost the guy. Finally we could head straight to the bar after our detour and linked up with the other part of our group. 2 hours pass, life is all good, we decide to head to another bar a bit further away. Because the drinks and prices kinda sucked in this one, we had 2 drinks in that bar, and guess who walks through the door and stands next to the table? That guy. Hey guys. At this point a friend 28M who is good at communicating, and frankly quite big, tells the guy that we want to keep to ourselves and have no interest in hanging out with him. Please leave us alone. Fortunately the guy says it is no problem and leaves. Unfortunately at around 3 AM, while dancing in the crowd at a club, the same guy announced his presence by tenderly pressing his body against the back of one of the girls 24F who he has been staring at through the mirror in the car. The girl's boyfriend 27M recognizes the guy. Gets angry as fuck, grabs him by the collar and essentially tells him that if he keeps following us, he will get the shit kicked out of him. A bouncer sees this and approaches them. I start talking to the bouncer, who was super annoyed by anyone intervening at first, but after hearing how this guy stalked us from his car to this club he just asks the Uber guy a few questions, then proceeds to throw him out. We stayed a bit longer than we wanted, in hopes of him not waiting for us. After that we reported the guy for being a creep in the app and called another Uber, which thankfully wasn't him. I caught a stalker while hunting a month ago. I am an avid hunter. I go every season, and I love it. More often than not, I don't kill any game, but I just love getting out into the woods. I don't know if you're familiar with hunting seasons in Pennsylvania, but during late November, rifle season is in full swing. It was already the second week of the season, and I had yet to bag any deer. So, I was eager to get to it, early in the morning. And I did. I normally get up around 5 a.m. and drive to my hunting spot. It's private land that my grandfather owns. Him and I are the only two who hunt on it. And the rest is posted to hunters. And the only others on the land are employed on my grandfather's farm. I had originally planned on calling my grandfather when I woke up and asking him if he wanted to tag along. But the weather that morning was horrendous. Snow was pouring down, and the wind was really strong. I love hunting in the snow, but it almost made me decide not to go. So, I knew he wouldn't want to. The roads were really bad, so it took me a bit longer to drive there. Normally, the sun would be starting to rise by now. However, it was overcast and snowing. Regardless of the snow, I walked up to my spot. It was directly behind my grandfather's house, over a hill, and back about 100 to 150 yards. Almost immediately upon sitting in my spot, I hear things moving all around me. Honestly, I didn't pay it much mind. It could be any number of things. But it was still pitch black, and the thought that it was a deer had crossed my mind. But there wasn't much I could do. It's not like I can shoot at it. So, I just ignore it, and continue to wait. It wasn't much longer after that I began hearing something walking just over the ridge to my right. At this point, there's barely enough light to see my feet. So, even if it was a deer, there was still nothing I could do. However, I could tell it wasn't a deer. I just assumed it was my grandfather, walking to his spot. Which is just a short walk from mine. But, the lights in his house were off. And if he was hunting up here, I'm sure he'd let me know prior. But even if it wasn't him, it was a hunter. Albeit hunting illegally. I still wanted to let him know I was here. So, I turned on my flashlight and pointed it in his direction. Flashing it several times. Again, even if it was a deer, I couldn't shoot it. So I felt it was better to be safe, rather than sorry. Nothing much happened after that. After I flashed my light, the noise stopped. Which was really odd. I didn't hear them turn back. So I figured they either A. sat down right there, after seeing my light, which is considered extremely rude, or B. I didn't hear them walk off. I just assumed it was the latter. An hour or so passes, and finally the first sights of daylight start to shine through. It's still snowing, and the snow is falling in entire snowballs, rather than snowflakes. So, visibility is pretty limited. But I just grinned, and bared it. I love snow, and even if I couldn't see any deer, I still found the weather beautiful. It was around this time that I noticed an odd-looking lump protruding out from a group of trees and shrubs atop the hill that separates me from my granddad's house. Right where I had heard movement earlier. It looked like a mound of dirt, however it was sticking out from the side of a tree. So, obviously, it wasn't dirt. Naturally, I raised my rifle up to take a closer look. I could tell immediately that I was looking at the side of an older style camouflage coat. It took a minute, but it finally clicked. That was a person over there. I just thought it was a hunter, so I didn't know what to do about it. I knew he was hunting on our land illegally, and from what I could see he wasn't wearing anything orange. Which is required of all hunters during rifle season. And I could tell just from looking, whoever this was, wasn't my grandfather. I sat there for a minute debating my next move. But I decided to call my granddad, at the risk of blowing his hunt if that was him over there. So, without taking my eyes off this guy, I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. To my dismay, he picked up. And I told him what was going on. So, he told me he'd make his way up. But I decided on my own to give the guy a whistle to let him know I see him. But he didn't react at all. After a few minutes, I started to walk up to this guy. After walking a short distance, I could clearly see this guy, who was sound asleep tucked in between a shrub and a couple of trees. He obviously thought out where to lay down, as I would never be able to see him, had his coat not stuck out. And as I thought, he had no orange on. I gave him another whistle, much louder, and he woke right up. Almost immediately shuffling over to hide his exposed coat, he had a nasty, scruffy beard, and a gray hat. Honestly, He looked like a harmless old homeless man. Probably in his 50s. But he had a perfect view of my granddad's home from his spot. And I have a pretty good idea what he was planning to do once my granddad left the house. Once this guy realized he'd been caught, and saw a mad 6 feet 5 inches guy, carrying a hunting rifle less than 10 yards away, making his way closer. His face went pale. Almost instantly he tried to feed me some bullshit that he'd gotten lost during a drive with a group of other hunters. A drive is a coordinated push through a thicket, in order to drive deer to hunters sitting at the end of the designated driving area. However, the closest public game land is miles from this spot. So I knew this was a lie. He'd just keep on going about how he was lost. And he fell asleep. He even went as far as to make up a fake name on the spot. I just stood there and listened, making sure he didn't make any fishy movements. I couldn't help but think about what this guy could have done to my grandfather. God knows he had the chance. And that thought pissed me off enough to tell the guy to shut the fuck up. That's about the point where I saw my granddad. My granddad is a tough old bastard, so my first thought was, this idiot is going to get himself killed. Luckily nothing happened. After he got there, we practically had to drag this guy down to the road, where my granddad called the cops, and I called my dad. Technically, this guy hadn't done anything yet. So all we could charge him with was trespassing and stalking. That was about a month ago, and since then, I haven't heard anything else about him. So, Stalker I found sleeping while I was hunting dash, let's not meet again. Stalked for 10 years, 2002, I was 14 years old, starting freshman year. I was an awkward nerdy girl that didn't know how to handle attention from boys, so you could say I made things worse for my situation. I had a knack for making friends with the weird people no one liked, but I tried to be friendly with everyone I met so it wasn't a big deal to me. Unfortunately, that was also my downfall. Clubs were a big deal and they actually had an anime club, so of course I was all about that. First club meeting, I sat next to a couple of friends and soaked it all up. I thought I was finally with my people. Then here comes Stalker Kid. I'd use his real name, but to this day I have no clue what it is. He sat in front of me, and being that person I said hi. I could tell he was uncomfortable and didn't know anyone, so I was just being nice. And boy did this guy cling to me for that one word. At first, he would just find me during lunch and just stand there mumbling things to me. He had such a soft voice, high-pitched, mousy little guy that you just felt unnerved when he spoke to you. The way he would look at you as he spoke, I could never look him in the eyes. After a while, it became more asking about my personal life and what I was into. Me being dumb and naive, I tried to be friendly and chat while feeling incredibly uncomfortable. After a while, my friends and I would move to different tables, benches, even hallways to avoid him, but he always found me. After about a year of this, my best friend finally told me that if I didn't tell him to fuck off, he would. I really didn't want him around anymore, so, sure, go ahead. So one day during lunch, here comes Stalker Kid with his signature greeting. Barely above a whisper, "Hey, name." My buddy just goes, "Dude, she's not interested, fuck off." Looking hurt, he shuffles away. I was like, man, you didn't have to be so hard on him, but a thanks. I didn't see him much around school after that except for club days where he would just sit across the room and stare at me while my best friend glared at him. Cut to me being 16 and driving now. Minus the awkward club days, I didn't really notice anything from him. That is until an old gray beat-up car started parking next to me extremely close. One day after school, he was waiting for me in that car. He started asking me how I've been, what about prom, all that stuff. I was trying to rack my brain on how he knew that was my car unless he had been watching me before and after school. I started getting there later and leaving later to avoid him, because he was like clockwork. Finally, a boy I used to be friends with in elementary school was walking out with me and made a comment about how that guy is always next to my car and asked if he was my boyfriend. I immediately said no. And he's always following me around and I hated it. It was really starting to freak me out. Bless this guy, because he walked right up to him and scared him off, threatening if he ever parked near me again he would kick his ass. I figured maybe that was enough to keep him away. So again, there was a small space where I would hear nothing of him except for my friends who had classes with him telling me how creepy he was. One friend had art class with him and said he would draw naked women constantly in his books. All big busted sexy pose women. Classy guy. Junior year is wrapping up, and I started taking my BFF, Phil we will call him, to and from school. He was on my way, so I figured why not. At some point, Phil started noticing that little gray car was always heading the same way after school, and made a joke thinking what if Stalker kid lived next to him. Haha, small world, right? I could only be so lucky. One day, as per usual, little gray car was following us, so we took a detour. Sure enough, he was with us every step of the way, and it was no longer a joke. We both started freaking out. I pushed the gas pedal as hard as my foot could push it and noped the fuck out of sight. I went home and told my mom everything, because at this point I knew this wasn't normal. She shoved it aside saying I was probably seeing things blah blah blah. Well, it came time for our end of the year club party. Of course SK, we'll call Stalker Kid from now on, was a senior, so I would never have to see him again. For whatever stupid reason, I offered to host the party thinking he hasn't gone to one yet. Let's celebrate this moment. I was terrified when my dad let him in the door. I don't remember giving him an invitation to the party, so someone must have given it to him. He spent the whole party talking to me, my dad, being all buddy-buddy with him, asking me where my room was. I just wanted to cry and hide. It was all downhill after that. I remember there were days where I would hear a car pull up outside my front door, and my room having a window that saw the front. I would call my buddy Phil and peek to see if it was him. 3 times in 1 month, I just hid under my desk and cried on the phone with philosophy. Other events from school would be him asking a girl I played softball with to prom, only to dump her and follow me all night. This includes to the after prom, where I never saw him in person. Our high school had a radio/TV channel for kids to run, and during prom they would record us going up the stairs and playing around in the gym at after prom for the parents to see their kids having fun. Took one of my friends to point it out, but it showed me playing DDR for a while against my friend Phil, and SK was standing right behind me watching for a good 5 minutes. Never knew. And the one that still creeps me out to this day is graduation for his class. Our classes were so big, they did a day and night ceremony where all the students had to attend the day one. I was scanning the crowd to see my friends who were graduating when I saw a hand wave as I passed by. I looked back, and of course it was SK waving at me. How he picked me out of a crowd of thousands I will never know. 2006 senior year was great, no signs of creepy SK to the point where I kind of forget about him. I graduate, I choose a college in town, get a job at a local retail store and move on. Life was beginning to be normal. I worked the gaming department, so you get the weird randos once in a while. One that I saw a lot was this little Mexican guy with glasses, this is important I swear, who never purchased anything but would just walk around from time to time. Then, this motherfucker SK comes strolling in the doors and walks into gaming and just talks. I ask how he knew I worked here. He says his friend saw me and knew we were friends. I tried to radio for help over and over for someone to come and get him out. Finally, a big guy from computers walks by and asks for my help in the back. Once he pulls me to safety, I tell him everything. From that point security is aware and is told to watch for this guy. Of course he wasn't doing anything physical, so all they could do for me is watch out for him. So every time he came in, they would walkie me, and I would dip back to the warehouse. I started seeing his friend, who we called Ninja Friend, NF now, constantly, and all he ever did was walked around on his phone. I began to suspect he was texting SK to tell him I was at work, because sure enough 10 minutes later he would come in too. So I tested this theory and started walking randomly around the store. At one point, a friend who worked register asked why I would do this, so I had her take a walk with me on her break. I told her this NF would follow us everywhere, even just going down a random aisle. Sure enough, he did, and she began freaking out. Few minutes later, I told her, my stalker would walk through those doors. Again, sure enough. So I'm making my way to the warehouse and out steps Ninja Friend from an aisle and says, "She's right here." I just stared at him, like, who the hell do you think you are? SK walks up behind me and asks why I'm always running away from him and, oh, He lost my number and asks if I can give it to him again. I say, knowing damn good and well I never gave it to him, sure. I go to the warehouse, right, this is where I work, don't ever come here again, and hand it to him, glare at his friend, walkie security about him, and sit in the warehouse and break down. Security tells me later that he also cried while they took him out. Later that day, as I'm leaving work, security offers to walk me to my car. This, of course, isn't the rules but friends caring about friends, so I say sure. SK is out by my car waiting for me, so this is where security says fuck it and calls police, which we are conveniently next to their headquarters. He books it when he sees the car. Few years go by, nothing comes up, I buy a fancy new car, and don't see him much. I'm thinking that did the trick and I'm finally free. 2012. My buddies and I are leaving work ready to hit a night at the bar per usual Thursday deal. We are all walking out the door, where we all have to stand and wait to hear the alarm sound to verify it's armed. As we are walking out, I hear it. That awful sound, hey, name, I cringe, grab my friend's arm and turn. There he is leaning on his car, waiting. My friend recognizes him and asks what he wants. Guy says he just wants to talk to me, he didn't ever see my car so he didn't think I worked here anymore. His other friend is sitting in the back seat of his car just staring at me blankly. I start to think the worst. If my friends leave me here, my gut tells me I'm not coming into work the next day. Or ever. I'm terrified that he's had years of time to think about our last encounter where I wrote my number down and made him cry. I grab my friend's arm tighter. My friend goes off, pretends to be my boyfriend and rips into him. My friend is about 2 feet taller and much bigger. They get into it, and I'm just standing in the parking lot, and I'm a terrible person for this but I'm sure you understand at this point, thinking kick his ass. He spooks SK so bad that I'm pretty sure he pissed himself before getting in his car and booking it. Ever since, if he comes into the store, my friend stares him down from his office, and he leaves. Never has bought anything in all these years. Years later, I've moved on, gotten married and moved out of town. Recently we've moved back to start a business, and to this day I still feel myself looking behind me at stores just in case I randomly bump into him. He caused me to have anxiety, mental and emotional pain, fear, and trust issues for a decade. Even after moving on, I still feel the effects today. And I never even knew his name. Update. Alright, I wrote this last night while laying in bed on my phone, so there wasn't a lot of specific details. To those who think I was playing the damsel in distress, no, I did not just roll over and let my friends do it all for me. These instances were just the big ones that I had friends to help me out. Yes, the way I handled him was terrible, but you have to understand that as soon as I heard him, my brain just froze and I wanted the experience to last as short as it possibly could, and for a teenager that stuff is terrifying. As I got older, I didn't tolerate his shit as much because I thought after high school I was safe. After it started affecting me at work, I didn't just rely on my friends to help me. There are plenty of times that I encountered him that I haven't written in here because they weren't anything more than the usual crap from him, like seeing anyone. How's work? I would make it short and be like, yup, I'm at work man, can you like not bother me? So once it got to the point that his little friend started following me around, and he was waiting for me, that's when my friend stood up for me. Also, a lot of people have asked me why haven't I just looked his name up in a yearbook. I never really cared to put a name to that face because I honestly wanted as little to do with him as possible. But after this post I've reached out to my old high school buddies and asked if any of them have a yearbook I can borrow to find his name, so stay posted. Update number 2, I have finally gotten my hands on a yearbook, and while I have taken a picture for my husband to finally see, I'm not going to show it on here. I can tell you that I have a name, which I will only share the first name just in case this magically gets around for him to see. It's Christopher.